we all know that you are a very successful person. I know you used to have the fastest and most latest model of, sports car and all that. But I want to know about your failures. Your personal failure, because everybody else knows all about your success. Yep. So can you talk about your failures?
Well, I'll do my, it's a long list. Okay, because if you're willing to do a lot, you're willing to have a lot of failures. The more surface you cover, the more failures you're going to have. You can do nothing and never fail. But if you do a lot and take a lot of risk, and in fact, I would argue, if you're never failing, you're not taking any risk. So don't fool yourself into saying, no, you're not risk taking. If you're risk taking, you're out there and you're making mistakes, learning and adjusting. So if you're going to fail fast, learn and move. But my first failure was job choice. So when I came out of college, I could have gone to Boeing or I could have gone to Microsoft. Had offers on both dimensions. And Microsoft was the up and coming company. This is pre-IPO, by the way, pre-stock era. Windows 1.0, so it's kind of the early days, and my buddy went to Microsoft, and I loved the manager at Boeing more than the one that I interviewed with at Microsoft, and so I chose manager, and most people will take manager over job. When they have a choice, right, the best managers over here, the best jobs over here, I went with manager. Also, Boeing Computer Services at the time was thriving. There's 20,000 people, had all kinds of cool stuff, so it was actually a cool company. But a realization of that was my buddy, who was number 2 in our, we always had a little friendly competition. I finished 1, he finished 2, close second. He's retired in 10 years. So I find out at a party and stuff that this dude's retired. And I remember, because I'm competitive, right? I remember kind of, realizing I'm kind of struggling away here. I've been here like 8 years and I'm making a little bit of money and stuff and doing okay. And I remember going, and you rationalize, right? You try to, the competitive nature of it got, and I remember laying in bed and I remember saying to myself, what difference would $10 million make? And then I just sat up. A lot of difference.
$10 million.
A lot of difference. That's generational money. That's a big difference. And that was the wake-up call that it was also my time to move on.
Right.
So I realized, the opportunity and the growth potential and stuff and the upper end of what you could do was greater. And so I ended up I had hired a lot of developers and they moved on to Microsoft. And I decided at that point in 1995, then I went over to help them out with Microsoft.com website. So that was a good move for me. But that was the first devastating mistake. Now, on the flip side is I learned a lot from that manager, who was a fabulous manager, and I learned a lot. So it made me a better manager in future years. So there's a pro and a con. The other thing is, just because I chose that doesn't necessarily mean I would have been wildly successful at Microsoft at that time. True. I didn't have the same skill set that I came in as an 8-year war-hardened veteran of Boeing. I was war-hardened, so I was a very different person when I went there. So I would say there was no guarantee. It would have all been dependent on what role I had got in. So the cool thing was I fully was largely developed, went over there and was able to write some software and have some success there, and it was a good move for me. So that was the first big failure. And then one of my most humiliating one, and this is one that I'll probably never get over, but it changed me as a coach, probably more than any other, is I had a kind of a mental model of how to build teams. And that was, you hire a few stars like yourself, Jay, and others. You sort of hire a few stars that are great coders, great developers, great designers, great leaders, and then you hire role players. So in other words, you have stars and role players. That was kind of the model I was using, 20 years ago. And that had worked well for me. I mean, the model had worked, not surprisingly. You get some, you got a few stars, they tend to carry your team a little bit to some extent, and they bring others along and help develop the rest of your team. And then I was given a job which was a team that was struggling to deliver. So they hadn't really delivered all that much, and I was asked to kind of turn this thing around a little bit. And their manager at the time had moved on. And I did some background, and I knew a lot of the members of the team. And I remember my assessment was, that I didn't have a star. So I looked at the team and I looked around and kind of, in my mind, my model had a flaw here. In other words, I needed a star on the team to be the person that led the rest of the team from a technical standpoint, right? It was grinding the code every day, and I didn't have that. And so what I was doing was I kind of shook things up, and I told people at a meeting, this is what we're going to expect. We're going to be a team that ships. We're predictable. We ship on time. That's what I expect from you guys. That's what we need to be successful here. And if you don't want to be part of that, you might want to consider moving on. So again, notice the youngness of my approach there. And I was direct and I was honest, but probably too honest in that case. Now, so I had new headcount. I'm starting to hire. I'm bringing people in through interview loops, and I get hit with a hiring freeze. So now I've rattled the cages on an existing team, right? Here's the new dude showing up, and he's already rattled the cages saying, hey, maybe you don't want to be here, right? Unless you're, in the program. And now I'm going to have to eat some, I'm going to have to eat some serious crow here, okay? Because I can't hire anybody. So here's the wake-up call for me. My model of hiring stars and building around a star or two and building all around it is now fatally flawed. I'm not going to be able to hire anybody.
Right.
I just got hit by a hiring freeze. All the people I had that were already in the loop are gone. So now I have to win with who's in front of me.
Right, right.
Right? So now this is a different coaching problem. Because again, my model, remember, hire the star and let everybody follow the star,
Yep.
right? Kind of like a pro basketball team. You get LeBron James and get a bunch of role players. You know, same thing with pro sports. But then I realized, you know what? I had to apologize to the team, tell them I was out of line. You know, what I said was stupid. And I asked people to forgive me and to stick with me and find a way to be successful together. And that was a turnaround when I learned to coach anybody. I needed to learn to coach anybody. Right. And I realized it's not all about cherry picking. It's not really as much about, it's developing, and that's when I had to learn to start developing people. How do you get people together and be able to share ideas so that you don't actually need any superstars?
True.
Because the aggregate of the team were superstar.
Right.
But the aggregate intelligence together was superstar level. Any individual by themselves probably wasn't going to be wildly successful. But if you took all the ideas that people had and that drove your design decisions, your implementation decisions, and you used the strength of the team, you were far better off than my previous model.
Right.
So it was really a wake-up call for me on that you can succeed with any team in front of you.
Right.
If you can't, you need to reassess yourself and figure out how to be a better coach.
Right.
And a better teacher. Remember, coaching and teaching,
Sure.
you got to be a better teacher.
Right, right.